All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin. I'm Dave Pollack. I'm a senior fellow here at the Washington Institute, the Bernstein Fellow, just for the record. And I want to thank you all for coming, welcome you. I see some really great Iraq experts and old friends around the room, and I'm delighted, and also some new faces. Likewise, most welcome. Today we're going to be having a very special presentation with two of the premier Iraqi experts. And by that I mean that they are Iraqis and that they are also experts on Iraq. And that is really, I think, a tribute to the Institute and its convening power, as our director sometimes likes to call it, bringing the best experts from the region here to an audience, to an expert audience in D.C. to talk about, I think, quite timely, complicated, and important subjects. So I want to start by setting the stage very, very briefly by asking myself and all of us three quick questions. Why is Iraq still important? Why is Iraqi public opinion important? And what does all of that have to do with the other country, that the other I country, as we used to say in government, right across the border, Iran, which is occupying so much political, media, and expert attention here in the United States these days? Let's start with why Iraq is still important. I do understand that, and this is the second event on Iraq that we've had in the last month, and I think the third in 3 months. I do understand that, to some extent, the American people, the American government, the American military, the American media, all of us have gotten a little bit tired of Iraq after 15 years since the American military intervention in that country in the spring of 2003. It seems almost like a never-ending problem. But the truth is, as I see it, that Iraq remains very important, a problem that hasn't been solved, but is perhaps on its way to some better resolution that serves very, very important American and regional interests. What are those interests? For one thing, you could say that they're negative in the sense that we don't want Iraq to become another time an incubator of jihadi terrorism or any other kind of terrorism, as it was during the rise of Daesh just a few years ago. And that problem remains, at least potentially, as we will hear, I think, in a few minutes. For another thing, we don't want Iraq, and I say right off the bat that these are what you might call negative reasons for Iraq's importance. We don't want Iraq to tip the balance in the region in a hostile direction, to become too pro-Iranian, or perhaps another source of regional instability for other reasons. But there are also positive reasons why Iraq is important. Iraq is a major demographic, economic, and I think it's probably fair to say even religious potential powerhouse in the region. One might keep in mind, for example, just to look at the economic aspect of Iraq's importance to the global economy, that Iraqi oil exports today are about half of Saudi oil exports, which is very significant in the global energy market. Even if the United States itself is no longer dependent on Middle East oil, the whole rest of the world is. And Iraq is an important contributor to the global energy picture, especially as sanctions against Iranian oil exports begin to take greater effect. And then I think it's also fair to say that Iraq is important in a positive sense because American credibility, American political stature, American influence in the region, in my mind at least, to some extent, to a significant extent, depends on how things turn out in Iraq. People in the region, inside Iraq, of course, here in the United States, and all around the world, think of Iraq, with some reason, as America's responsibility, because of our military intervention there that toppled the Saddam Hussein brutal dictatorship 15 years ago. And Iraq remains an important place where the results of American policy are being tested every day. If things turn out relatively well in Iraq, that will be a plus for American credibility and American influence in the region and around the world. And if they turn out more negatively, that will, I think, unfortunately, be a kind of shadow over American influence, credibility, and stature in the region and around the world as well. So for all of those reasons, Iraq is important. Now, why is Iraqi public opinion important? It's not only because Iraq is an electoral democracy in which it actually matters how people cast their votes, as we just saw earlier this year, and as we continue to see right up until today as the Iraqis struggle to put a complete government together under the new leadership that was elected last May. But Iraqi public opinion is also important as an indicator of what is to come. And I want to give you just a few very quick examples that I'm inspired to provide from Munqidh's earlier work in measuring and analyzing Iraqi public opinion, and a little bit from some of my own earlier work as a pollster in the region, working in Iraq specifically. The rise of Daesh in 2014, although it seemed to take almost everyone by surprise, most of all the Iraqi government and the Iraqi army in Mosul and elsewhere, could have been, I think, predicted had people paid more attention to some of the underlying trends in Iraqi society in the years leading up to that horrible moment in 2014. The rising polarization, the rising sectarian tension, the rising disenchantment, particularly among the Sunni minority in Iraq. And Munqidh's work pointed to those trends and helped to explain why it was that in 2014, at least, there were hundreds of thousands of people in Mosul and elsewhere who actually welcomed Daesh, at least for the first year. And that helps to explain why all of a sudden, 1/3 approximately of this very important country was suddenly overrun by what seemingly was just a small band of ragtag terrorists. What people think, ordinary people think in Iraq, really does matter. I'll give you another example. What happened in Kurdistan, and I was a witness to this personally, around the time of the referendum there a year ago, and what seemingly were sudden divisions that erupted inside the Kurdish political constellation and even the Kurdish security forces, took a lot of people by surprise. But that, too, was something that Munqidh's own work, which he presented here on another occasion, could have and actually did predict. Public opinion among the Kurds in Iraq was nowhere near as positive or as unified as many people thought on the outside. And it was only by looking carefully at the underlying indicators objectively that Munqidh's research reveals that one could understand what actually happened during and after the referendum in Kurdistan last year. The final example that I want to give very briefly just to set the stage is what's going on right now in Iraq. The Iraqis had an election, and they're putting together a new government. And the signs are, according to many people, and I include myself in that category, relatively positive. But underneath the surface, there are some trends in Iraqi society and Iraqi public opinion that are not as positive. And in order not to be taken by surprise once again, we need to pay very close attention to the kind of research that Munqidh will present in just a minute in order to save us from unpleasant surprises and enable us to do something about them before the worst-case scenarios in Iraq, and more broadly, because of Iraq's influence in the region, might come to pass. And in that respect, it occurred to me as I was rushing to get here a few minutes ago that your name is very appropriate. Munkid's name in Arabic means the guy who rescues you, the guy who saves you. And this research that you're doing, I really believe this, has the potential to save us, as I just said, from the unpleasant surprises that we've become all too accustomed to in the Iraqi case. Finally, one last word of introduction before I turn the floor over to our speakers. I asked myself, and I asked you the question when I started speaking, what does all this have to do with Iran? It has a lot to do with Iran. Because Iraq is a neighbor, and an important neighbor of Iran, more important now than ever because of the sanctions and the other constraints that are operating on Iran, which will push it to try and make more use of its Iraqi neighbor for economic, for security, for political, for diplomatic, for whatever ways it can exploit its influence in Iraq in order to serve Iran's own interests. And Iraqi public opinion about Iran is something that I think is going to matter a lot in the coming months and years. And there are some surprises here too. My own research in Iraq back in 2010, 11, 12, 13 revealed that the Shia connection between Iraqis of that religious sect and Iranians next door was not what many people thought. In fact, the Shia in Iraq were actually, not all of them, but many of them, quite anti-Iranian. And that was an important limit on, at least potentially so, on Iran's influence in that country and Iran's ability to use Iraq for its own purposes more broadly across the region, as far afield as Syria and Lebanon and elsewhere, and of course in the Gulf. The question today is that still the case? And if so, how much of an impact does the Iraqi public's attitudes toward Iran and Iranian influence in their country, how much effect is that likely to have on the geopolitical situation in Iraq itself and in the broader region, and of course in the American effort to contain and maybe roll back Iran's malign influence, as our government often calls it, in the region as a whole? So I am not going to try to answer that question. I'm going to turn the floor over to Munkid for your presentation on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you
for being with us.
Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure to be in this institute to introduce some of my findings. This is not my first time. Hopefully, it will not be my last time. The introduction of David was so excellent, which will avoid or will allow me to even press my presentation, because he really briefed the entire work which I did in Iraq recently. So saying this, I will go directly to my presentation to save some time. As pollsters always take care of methodology, this is a brief methodology on how do we work. I have a research group in Iraq, and we have been working since 2003 till now. We are the first polling organization in Iraq, and I can claim that we are the biggest. We still work since 2003, and we are using a very, very sophisticated quality control procedures up to the international standard. I can say that even better than many other international standards. So all what you will see here is based on face-to-face interviews done in Iraq during the last 15 years. I have tried to compile it in one package and present it to present the base or the basic idea which I want to send here is that it is a historical moment in Iraq public opinion history, at least since we started. As I was the first pollster in Iraq and first public opinion I did it in Iraq was just 2 weeks after the invasion. Till now, I can see that this is the most significant moment in Iraqi public opinion history. And why I am saying that. Here are there are 3 main shifts taking place currently in Iraq public opinion. I will give some examples because I cannot show all my evidence, but some example, I will focus on it to have the idea clear. What is the first? The first is, the first shift is that it is for the first time we see Sunnis happier than Shias and Kurds. The usual trend in Iraq since 2003 till 2016 was that Shias feel more happy, Kurds feel more happy, Sunnis are really unhappy. As you can see, these numbers, which I have it from 2014. Of course, I have even deeper historical data. But as you can see right now, those Sunnis who feel that they are happy higher than Shia at in the last poll we did. Trust in government. As David say that one of the predictors that I use to predict that there is something wrong in the Sunnis areas before Daesh took over Mosul and other areas was the trust in the government. Always, the trust in government among Shia was much higher than Sunni. This is the first time we are witnessing a new trend. Sunnis have higher trust in the government than Shia and Kurds. It's not only in the government, but in the institution. So, for instance, in the Iraqi police, still we have Sunnis who have more trust in the Iraqi police than Shia and Kurds. Confident in the judicial system. This was one of the most important indicators I used to predict that something wrong will happen in Mosul and this area. Trust in judicial system. It was very, very low among Sunni. And as you can see right now, the trend is totally opposite in comparison with other 2 sects in Iraq. But here we should take care. These numbers should not be interpreted as Sunnis are better than Shias or than Kurds. We should take care of that. This phenomena has been addressed well in psychology, and it has one of these 2 explanations. The relief effect, when you are under pressures, under high pressures, as Sunnis had from ISIS or from Daesh for 2 years, and you release from this pressure, usually you express higher happiness, higher feelings than usual. So this can be explained in this way. But in both cases, or in all cases, this is the right moment for the Iraqi government or for the politician to use this desire of Sunnis to be involved in the government or in the political process. Because as we know, one of the main problems faced Iraq after 2003 was Sunnis were so reluctant to be involved, especially the Sunnis leaders. Many Sunnis leaders, they were so hesitant to be enrolled in the political process because of people pressures on them. Right now, it seems that people will accept, be involved or engage in the political process, and this is very important for Iraq. Now, the second main shift. The second main shift is that we are moving from inter to intra-sectarian conflicts. So instead of the usual traditional conflict which we had in Iraq between Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds, right now we have it intra-sectarian. So we have Shia, Sunni, Kurd conflict. And this is very good. By the way, it's not because it means that Iraqis are moving from sectarian politics to interest politics, to base their deal and trade-offs on interest, not on sectarian basis. And I will give you here some example to underline my point of view. So it's moving from, as I said, inter to intra-sectarian. Here, as you can see, the problem is I cannot.
Oh, you can't see.
Can't see here. Yeah. But here I should put my glasses.
Okay.
So, as you can see here, I have put two slides about the national identity. The sectarian identity for Iraqis is getting lower and lower. Those who believe that their sect as Shias or Sunnis give them the feel of identity is getting lower. As you can see here, it was, for instance, among Sunni Muslim, it was 31% on 2003. Almost 1/3 of Sunnis chose it. Also around the same among Shia. Right now, it's 2% or 4% only.
Wow.
Yes. It is declining sharply. Another example. Now, a citizen of Iraq, being a citizen of Iraq as a national identity for people, it raised from around 48 on 2013. Now it's 69 among Sunnis, it's 65 among Shia. Even among Kurds, it's little bit going up, but the good thing is it's not getting worse in Kurds. Still, we have Kurds who believe that being Iraqi citizen can identify their ID. The ethnicity. Here I put this just for Kurds because it is significant for Kurds here. As you can see, on 2018, around the time of the referendum, 54% of Kurds referred that their ethnicity represents their ID. This dropped down now to 42, which is also, in 1 year, it lost around 12%, which is very significant lose. So now the general picture, the big picture is that people are going from polarized sectarian attitudes toward more middle range attitudes. But the shift moved from there to intra, as I said. I will give you some example. Here, when we ask people about going in the right direction, Iraq going in the right direction or wrong direction, see the differences in the same sect. As you can see, in Basra, for instance, which is Shia province, 92% saying that we are going in the wrong direction, while Shia in general, 80%. We have 12% difference, which is statistically, it is significant, very significant on all statistical significance level. Same for Sunnis. We always witness a big difference between the opinions of Mosul versus other Sunnis. In Mosul, they feel more happy. They feel more confident right now. So as you can see, 55% of them saying that we are going in the wrong direction. Still very high, but in comparison with other Sunni, almost they say 70% say that we are going in the wrong direction. Same for Kurds. Significant differences between Suleimaniya attitudes and other Kurds attitudes. Trust in the Iraqi government. It's the same. As you can see, 10% of Basra people have trust in the Iraqi government versus the total Shia, or the average Shia, is 20%. So less than a half in Basra. Same for Mosul, 50% they have trust in government versus 34 other Sunnis. In Suleimaniya, trust in the Iraqi government, not in Kurdistan government, 32 they have trust in the Iraqi government among Suleimani versus 7% among other Kurds. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The government is providing security in country. It's the same. We have differences between Sunnis in Mosul, 74%, versus other Sunnis, 40%. Between Basra and versus others. Between Suleimaniya versus others. Votes are counted fairly. Same, we have same differences in public opinion. Between Mosul people, 30% believe that it counted fairly versus only 13% for other Sunnis areas. Basra, 24% versus 30% for Shia. And Kurds, 19% in Suleimaniya versus 37% in for other Kurds. So now what is the third main shift? The third main shift, which might be very interesting here in DC, is that we have a less outside polarization. Since I started on 2003, public opinion polarized, as I've told you before, on a sectarian level. And this including the support for the regional countries, regional neighbors. So Shias always support Iran, Sunnis always support Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Now, things also are changing, and changing significantly, especially on the Shia side. Especially on the Shia side. Let us see some examples and some numbers. This is a standard question, which we always ask people. Do you think that Iran is a reliable partner to Iraq? Look, in 2016, 75% of Shia thought that it is a reliable partner. Now it is 44%. We have a significant drop. And the most significant drop was here after 2017, exactly after the last election. The last election, and there are two things happened, as I explained that in my article in the Washington Post a week ago. It's two main things happened which really affected the relation between Shias and Iran. The first thing was the Basra protest. And the Basra protest is attributed by Basrawis, which I am proud that I am part of them, attributed to Iran. So that was so clear and covered very well in the news. The second thing is that in the political process in forming the new government, there was a clear interference or pressures by both USA and Iran on forming the new government. And for the first time, these pressures revealed publicly. On 2014, 2010, before that, everything done in a black room. Or some people knows about it. Right now, because of the media coverage, because of the social media, I'll give you one number. On 2014, the percentage of Iraqis who have internet access was less than 40%. Right now, it's almost 80%. And around 90% of young Iraqis, they have accounts in one of the social media platforms. So they are tracing all the what happened, especially in forming the Iraqi government, and they saw the pressures by the Iranian proxy or by the Iranian representative and by the U.S. representative as well. So they saw both. And this is why we have this decline, sharp decline in the support for Iran, because simply people or Shias blame government for their sufferings. And since if they see anyone who's supporting the government, supporting the current government or the previous government, this means that this will be part of their sufferings. And this is why we have this sharp decline. Another example, do you think that Iran's involvement in Iraq affairs bolster Iraqi sovereignty or threatens Iraqi sovereignty? As you can see, among Shia, those who are saying that it is in the favorite of Iraq is only 11%. Only 11%. Sorry, not 11. Yeah, 38%. Among Sunnis, it's 11%. The question is, do you think Iran's involvement in Iraq affairs bolster Iraqi sovereignty or threaten Iraqi sovereignty? So we have 56% say that it's a threaten Iraqi sovereignty among Shia. This is also very interesting, as you can see here. Please tell me whether you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the following countries. Iran. As you can see, there was, since 2014, a continuous, steady decline in Iran favorability. But the most significant decline was or happened during the last year, during the last few months, actually, after the election. So it dropped down from 67% on 2017 to 47% on 2018. So only 47 of Shias looked to Iran in a favorable way. Same for Saudi Arabia among Sunni. As you can see here, on 2012, 90% of Sunnis, they had a favorable attitude towards Saudi Arabia. This dropped down to 60% now, which means that it lost. Still, we have a good or significant percent of people, of Sunnis, who are supporting or who have a positive public opinion toward Saudi, but it's dropped down sharply. So these three main shifts which happened in Iraq right now might be a good news, because it might be translated in a way that right now Iraqis are ready for more national patriotic policies. But at the same time, if we go down, if we break down the data, we will witness or we will see some alerts. And these alerts, some of it, I saw it on 2014 before Daesh took over. So the Iraqi government and its alliance, its friends, should be alerted and should take care. I'll give some few examples on that. This is the trend of going in the right or wrong direction in Iraq since November 10. As you can see, we started with the going in the right direction, 45%. versus 44 saying that we are going in the wrong direction. That was on November 10. Right now, almost 80% of Iraqis saying that we are going in the wrong direction. Almost 90%. This is a real concern. Do you think that May 2018 Iraqi parliamentary election were mostly free and fair or mostly not free and fair? This is from the poll conducted by NDI. As you can see, almost all Iraqis, whether in Baghdad, whether in the south, whether in the west, whether in Kurdistan, they do believe that it wasn't a free and fair election. And if people don't believe in election, then what is the alternative? Thinking about life in general, is it better or worse right now? Those who are saying better, they drop down from 77% to almost 40% or 39%. Those who are saying that it is worse, it's jumped from 21% on June 15 to 38% right now. So most people think that their life now is worse. In the Sunni Arab areas, because this is the area where Daesh could reappear again. Do you think that things in Iraq are going in the right direction? As you can see, on 2017, 63% of Sunnis believe that we are going in the right direction. This declined to only 41% right now. This is also worrying. The national identity, as you can see, it's here. From 2008 till 2018. The national identity, though it is right now better than it was on 2014, but if we compare it with 2008, where we have 80% of Iraqis saying we are Iraqis above all, now we have only 65% who are saying that we are Iraqis above all. How concerned are you that ISIL or similar organization will reappear in your city? As you can see, look to the, on August 2017, only quarter of Iraqis think that Daesh can reappear. Now, 74% of Iraqis think that Daesh might reappear. This is from the World Value Survey, which I conducted recently. What's your opinion regarding having a strong leader who does not care neither about parliament nor about the election? We have now 66% in total support this statement. They want a leader who just don't care about democracy or whatever, means Saddam or whoever coming back. We want a strong leader. And by the way, there is now in Basra something new. They call it the third trend. The third trend. And this is a very dangerous trend, because the third trend, it means that we have two trends in Basra, Islamic and civil or secular. The third trend right now, it's a bunch of young Basrawis who believes in change in violence. things cannot be changed by democracy. Democracy does not work in Iraq. This is what they believe in it. So, and in this trend, you can see clerics, people with imama and everything, and you can see very secular young people. And this is really annoying. The country mood worsening, especially in the West. Large majority sees Iraq more divided than unified. These are the numbers here. And finally, I just want to stick to the time. The elections turnover over the last 4 terms, as you can see it here. On 2015, we had 82% turnout. Yes,
right,
yes, sorry. Yeah. 82 turnout, 82%. This dropped down on 2010 to 64, and then 2014 we had 60% drop down again, and then dropped down significantly to 43% almost in the last election, which is also a very bad indicator. So, saying that, I will leave the rest for you to for Q&A.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Munkid. Now, I'm not sure, after I started out being optimistic, now you left us on a sort of a pessimistic note.
Yep.
So I'm going to leave it to Ahmed to decide which is the right approach here. Optimistic or pessimistic about Iraq?
Sounds good. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to make sure everybody in the back can hear me. David, can you hear me? Does that sound good? Good afternoon, and I'm delighted to be at the Washington Institute. Always good to be back here, and always good to be able to discuss Iraq here, because I think David and the Institute in general have been very good about keeping attention on Iraq, and keeping attention on Iraq is the right thing to do, as you saw from the data that Munqidh presented. I do want to highlight a piece that David and I wrote in September 2011 about the Iranian government influence and the views that the Iraqi public had, and it was very similar, David, actually, if you remember. And that's a piece.
I don't remember, but
that's
I'll take your word for it.
I do, because it does reflect some of the ongoing problems that Iraq still has. Even if you looked at the results and the findings that Munqidh presented, some of them are actually very similar, and very similar compared to, if you looked at the time periods that Munqidh has tracked over the last 10 years, let's say. Some of the events and some of the developments that take place in Iraq are very, very predictable. It's I would say it would be very wrong to say that events in Iraq are not predictable. You can, in fact, predict a lot in Iraq, and one of the tools to predict is public opinion polling, which I agree with David is very accurate in Iraq, and it does present a good view. I think these days public opinion in Iraq is, as Munqidh presented, is widely swayed and widely influenced by social media. It's not just about the traditional media anymore, but most importantly, public opinion in Iraq is decided by the actions of the politicians and the political class. I think that's very important to keep in mind, because even if you look at the positive mood that exists in some parts of the country, it is a result of the political action, let's say. At the same time, the way Munqidh ended his presentation presented a very bleak view of what could happen and what would happen if some changes do not take place in Iraq. And we have been through that cycle before. And if you looked at one of the slides and that Munqidh presented, in 2010 there was a very good mood in Iraq. There was a honeymoon in Iraq, and if we remember the events of 2010, that's when Iraq defeated Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI. When Prime Minister Maliki was not
popular hero.
he he had a good he had Prime Minister Maliki had a good view. People viewed him well back then. Clearly, as U.S. forces withdrew, Prime Minister Maliki took the country in a different direction, and we saw the rise of ISIS and other events. So I would say it's good. My big takeaway, and I was taking notes live as Munqadh was presenting, and also I had a chance to see the polling results beforehand. My big takeaway is that I'm in the middle, David. I'm not optimistic and I'm not pessimistic either, because there is a lot that could be built on, and there's also a lot of indicators that we have to keep in mind and be careful about. So I want to end, very very quickly in the next 5 minutes, just present you some analysis of the polling and also my commentary on it. I think one of the big takeaways that you saw from the polling is that there is a legitimacy crisis in Iraq at the moment. The political process in Iraq is not viewed favorably by the population. If you saw the results of the views of Iraqis on elections, that's actually very telling, and it's very concerning. The fact that Iraqis 66% favor a strong leader, Munqadh, right? That's not a good indicator for the political system of Iraq, for the democratic system of Iraq, and it shows a big gulf, really, and a big difference in the public view and the political view. Because I can tell you, if you talk to Iraqi politicians, and I'm not going to name any of them, but if you talk to them, you would notice that the Iraqi political class does not grasp these public opinions, really. It does not understand that public opinion is changing. The events that happened in Basra, for example, over the summer with the protest in Basra, the anti-corruption protests, were very predictable. It was clear that the people of Basra are angry, and it was clear that the people of Basra and southern Iraq in general want to see change, but we did not see any reactions from the Iraqi government. So there is something for the Iraqi government to work with there. Clearly, a big area for policymakers in D.C. And also policymakers in Baghdad to pay attention to is post-ISIS reconstruction. We have good news from the polling results in which people and residents of post-ISIS areas feel more optimistic about the future of the country than the rest. That should not fool us, really. I think the Iraqi government at the moment has not been very serious about reconstruction in post-ISIS areas. And there has not been a lot of work to address the grievances in post-ISIS areas, and working to include post-ISIS areas in a more nationally integrated process. So the Iraq government has a lot of work to do there. One of the things that we did not see, or we actually did see it in the poll results that Munqadh presented, is the view that ISIS could actually return, and that's a serious possibility in Iraq today. It will be wrong to say that ISIS is defeated in Iraq today. In fact, it's far from defeated. It's still active in many areas. It could easily return, and I'm going to present recommendations on what to do to make sure that ISIS does not return, because it's a serious possibility, as you saw from the results. The first thing that the Iraqi government can do is work on the governance of the country and initiate some institutional reform in the country. It is good news that we have more Iraqi Sunnis in this case view the judiciary system as more fair, let's say, and the police as more fair. But it's also therefore, or at least that view is not necessarily reflective of deep changes within the Iraqi system and within the Iraqi political structure. I think the judiciary system, for example, in Iraq has to be worked on, and there has to be improvement in order for Iraqis to be able to trust the system. And the police, was mentioned as one institution. I would say there are many other institutions in the country that do need serious reform and serious work from the Iraqi government moving forward. I think one important thing that we should take with us today, from Munqadh's presentation as well, is the need to restore trust in the electoral process in Iraq. The electoral process in Iraq and elections in Iraq have been something of a positive note for the last, I would say, last 13 years. Despite difficulties, despite many problems, they always give people a sense of hope, a sense of optimism. And unfortunately, the May 2018 elections did not produce those results, as we see from the polling results. And it wasn't about the conduct of election day per se, even though there were problems with the voting on the voting day, but it's also about what happened after the voting took place. You had serious allegations of fraud throughout the country, a lot of it in Kurdistan as well, and that those allegations really damaged the political process. And I think the current political system has a lot of work to do to restore faith in the electoral process, which would be reflective on the public mood and also on the political process as a whole. Finally, let me just say that this government, the new Iraqi government that David mentioned early in the presentation, still has a lot of work to do. It's a partial government. Out of 22 ministries, only 14 ministries have been filled, and we still have eight very important ministries to be filled and decided. And the early indicators is that this Iraqi government is facing many difficulties and facing many challenges, and is unlikely to be able to tackle all the challenges that the polling revealed and that my analysis shows as well. Therefore, Iraqis and the Iraqi government will not be able to tackle all these problems by themselves. I think it will need the help of the international community, clearly the United States. And this goes back to, if I may close the loop this way, David, it goes back to to what you said in your remarks, is that this town might not focus on Iraq, but Iraq is very important, and the work of the United States government will be important for Iraq moving forward. So with that, I do end my remarks, and I look forward to your questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, really. And I am going to, and thank you for sticking to the time limit, both of you, which gives us plenty of time for your comments and questions. I did get one question from our online viewership, but I'm going to hold that. I will get to you. And now I'm going to open up to you, the audience, for comments and questions. Bilal, yeah.
Thank you very much. That was very informative. How does the recent KRG Iraqi federal government rapprochement going to impact the trends and the dynamics that you outlined, both in the analysis by Ahmed and Dave and your data, Munqidh? Thank you.
You want to take that?
Okay. Can you elaborate more on what you... Because I can see that there is something you want to say.
Oh, no, it's a genuine question. So, for example, Mr. Barzani visited Baghdad.
But let's start with this, if I may jump in. Do you agree, both of you, that there is a rapprochement between the KRG government and the Baghdad government, between Erbil and Baghdad, or not? Let's start with the premise of your question.
Yeah. For me, I think that there is a good chance for this, and especially that the Prime Minister and Mr. Barzani have a very good relation, historical relation. But in Iraq, my experience telling me that you cannot always, especially when it comes to politicians, you cannot, because policies are not always based on rational. Mostly it's based on personal, not rational judgments. So for now, yes, there is a good chance, a very good chance. And we saw this, as you can see, but still we have another problem, which is the president versus Barzani, the PUK versus KDP versus Al-Jil Al-Jadid, etc. There are a lot of dynamics which eventually will tell us, and especially the establishment or the completion of the new government, because there are still some new ministers should be chosen based on the agreement between Kurdistan and Iraq, and we will face the real challenge, which is the oil law. This will be the real test. This will be the litmus test. Yeah.
So
Okay.
if I may comment on
Please.
that, David.
Yeah.
What I would say is that there is real rapprochement between Baghdad and Erbil, and as Monqadh noted, there are differences within Kurdistan as well,
Right.
between the PUK and KDP. But there is rapprochement between, say, Baghdad and Erbil, and let's say Baghdad and Suleimania as well. We just saw President
How
Masoud
about
Barzani.
between Erbil and Suleimania?
That one, if somebody else asks it, David, we can answer it. But well, I think even Erbil and Soleimani, I think Monqadh talked about that. There's some tensions now. So the rapprochement is really, President Barzani was in Baghdad. We know the KDP. President Barzani was in Baghdad just over the last 2-3 days, and that was an important visit. The KDP led the push for the referendum back in 2017,
Yep.
and that burned many bridges with political parties in Baghdad. But the fact that President Barzani made the realization and decision to go to Baghdad, engage Iraqi politicians and the Iraqi public sphere, I would say as well, is a sign of real rapprochement. But in terms of Bilal's question on how it would affect public opinion, I think it will play a big role. This real rapprochement that I'm seeing now, it will play a big role on improving people-to-people relations and improving the public mood, because I mentioned in my remarks that political actions do translate into how people feel, and this is especially true for ethno-sectarian relations in Iraq. The actions of Prime Minister Maliki really exacerbated sectarian tensions in the country, exacerbated ethnic tensions in the country. So I think if we see rational moves by politicians in both Baghdad and Erbil, you can have improved relations within the Iraqi Kurds and the Iraqi Arabs. And clearly, there's a lot of work to be done between both Baghdad and Erbil on the security front, for example, to work on limiting ISIS and making sure that ISIS is not a big threat moving forward. And the oil deal is actually one good indicator so far that was just recently struck between Baghdad and Erbil for the Kirkuk oil fields. So I think it's the rapprochement between Baghdad and Erbil is real. And it's needed, but again, it has to be long term. It's not about short term.
Okay, great. I saw a few hands go up. I've got your names, and I'm going to take you in the order that I saw you. So let's start with Rend Arahim, right there in the middle. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Monqadh. Thank you, Ahmed. Excellent presentation. I have a technical question about the survey or the opinion poll, and I also have a policy question. Technically, did you disaggregate for age? So we can, if we go back to the report, look at the answers in terms of age difference.
Right.
That's
Yes.
important.
Yes.
Okay.
On data. If you go back to the data, not to the report.
Yes,
because-
to the data.
Yes,
Do you mention
for sure.
in your report
Yes.
these differences
For sure.
of answers
Yes.
according to age? You do
Yes.
disaggregate for
Yes.
age. Excellent. Okay, thank you.
But here I should highlight some very important thing which I have been asked by the British, and this is very new. There is an idea that there are big differences between young and old Iraqis. Actually, except in a very few areas, in general, on the political situation, they are very similar.
Well, even that is indicative.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
important.
okay.
Important to
The
know.
policy question is this, that this report shows that there is a turning point in public opinion.
Yes.
And this turning point provides opportunities. And you're saying that the politicians in Iraq should seize the moment
Yep.
and seize these opportunities. At the same time, I think Ahmed said that the politicians don't listen. And they are not paying attention to public opinion. Does that mean we are hitting a wall? Where do we go
Great question.
if we have these incompatibles? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rand, for this question. But for the second question, this is a big dilemma for any consultant, for any pollster as well. I do think that you also believe that one of the things that we always face when we provide data and information and report, decision makers not always take it seriously, especially if it does not come in line with what they think about it. And especially in our area. In our area, we do have this kind of culture or of leadership, which is in Arabic, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's in Arabic, I say it that it is the model of أنا ربكم الأعلى فاعبدون. I mean, I am the supreme God, and you should pray for me. I am the one who knows everything. And always when I inform decision makers about these numbers, they say, to whom you went? Whom did you ask? Oh, did you ask these illiterate people? Did you ask the women? Did you ask? These are not the people who are really knows about Iraq. So this is a big dilemma which we always face. But the all numbers, and not only numbers, the last election proved that politicians are listening. They may act in a different way, but they are listening. And they are listening, and I'll give you a very important example. Right now, as you can see, the alignment or the two main alliances, these are going on a vertical, not horizontal base. It means in each block we have Kurds, Shias, and Sunnis. Versus previously we had only Shias, Sunnis, and Kurds blocks. Previously, Iran, when it during the establishment or the forming of a new government, usually it asked Iraqi politicians to go to Tehran. This time it sent not only Qasim Soleimani, but Mushtaba with him and the ambassador, and they played a big role there. So these are a reflection of the dynamics taking place in on the ground. So people are listening. There are now a lot of incidents taking place on the media, which really affect the decision makers. I can give you many examples. One of the examples, if you follow the social media in Iraq right now, this what's going on or what's happened between the governor of Mosul and this teacher. Now the governor of Mosul is threatened to be dismissed. Why? Because of the media pressure. And the media pressure is not from the usual traditional media outlet, let's say Al-Hurra or whatever, because it doesn't affect Iraqis. Al-Hurra has less than 5% viewership. But the social media, So I do believe that they are listening. They might act in a different way, but eventually, they will have to adhere to the public opinion.
So I think, David, if I may, on that. So this Rwanda's, Ambassador Rahim, as you know, and many of you who follow Iraq, the reaction to what the governor of Mosul did is really out there, because the governor of Mosul, he berated a teacher, and it was actually a principal of a school, and that video was put on social media. So now there is a controversy about it, but it is not the first time he has done that, and this is not the first time this was captured by video. So clearly there is, I think, the Iraqi political class really does not pay attention to what the public says, because if we look at the current parliament as well, one of the first things it did was allocate $2,500 a month for rent for MPs in Baghdad. Which is, look, Baghdad, I go to Baghdad, it's very expensive, but $2,500 is a lot of money. So, and it caused a big controversy in Iraq. So it shows the disconnect between the political class and, and the public. And if I may just comment on actually both your observations and questions, Ambassador, I think the Iraqi youth see the future differently. If you look at it, from Kurdistan, you have a generation that doesn't remember what Saddam Hussein did. It hasn't seen it really. It only hears about it from their parents and maybe sometimes discussions on TV. It's living a different reality. The same thing for the youth in Basra, who are predominantly Iraqi Shia, but they see the Iraqi Shia-dominated government as not representative of their ambition. And this idea, if a politician goes on TV and says that you still have to support us because of what Saddam Hussein did to us, nobody's going to pay attention to that. That's not going to sell. That's not going to fly. Let's say, as we say here in the U.S. In Iraq, people are not going to believe in that. So the Iraqi youth they view the future differently. They view the past and they view the present differently as well. And on the policy prescription to help Munqidh get over that wall and make sure his frustration is less than before as a pollster, I think there has to be a concerted effort to remind Iraqi politicians and I would say even U.S. decision makers on the fact that events in Iraq are predictable. The rise of ISIS could happen again, and we have a lot of evidence to show for that. The problem, as Munqidh said, is that Iraqi politicians, decision makers, and U.S. and policymakers in the U.S. are so busy with day-to-day issues that they don't think about those future challenges. So it's your job, Munqidh, and my job as well and David's job, and the Washington Institute's job really to remind policymakers about the challenges that the country faces.
That's our job. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I have the following people on my list. Okay. I have next is Haneen, then Amatzia, then Mohammed Abdulaziz, and then I'm going to take Tom back there, and I want to have a chance, and we will have a chance to squeeze in the very good question that came from our online audience. Yeah, Haneen, please.
Thank you very much, David, for organizing this.
Sure.
Thank you very much for a fascinating presentation. I learned a lot from it. And I would like to know if you have conducted any polls or you have any information on the Iraqi public opinion in general, but mainly the Shia public opinion on the Najaf's role, whether on what the Najaf had, not necessarily the religious role of the Najaf, more so the political role of the Najaf, especially recently with the slight shift it's been making. So where do you see, and also your opinion on where do you see the Najaf today in Iraq?
Okay.
Thank you.
The Marja'iyya, the clerics, yeah, yes. Right, yeah, right, okay, yeah, good, great question.
Yes. Directly about al-marji'iyya, we did not do. This is one of the taboos which
I was
we.
going to say, this is a taboo, right?
Yes.
Every pollster has his taboos. and
But
it varies from one country to the other.
But one very indicative number.
Yeah.
On 2014, Iraqis who have trust in the religious institution was 74%.
Okay.
Right now, it is 48%.
Wow.
Trust in the religious institution. We cannot ask directly about the marji'iyya, but we ask about the religious institution.
Yeah.
Again, this is taboo. If you have people and you should take care of them, I have 3 of my interviewers who have been beheaded on 2007. I have almost 80% of my team sent to jail once or twice, captured by militias, different things. So I should take care of my people. So asking some things or some taboos is like putting them in a very risky situation. But in general, as I've told you, the religious trend is going down, and the trust in the religious institution is going down. And I'll give you one also very indicative other example. The first protests went out back on 2011. It was in Najaf and in front of Al-Marji'iyya house.
Okay. That's really interesting. And I wish we could have more data about it, but it's really interesting.
There are 74 and 48%.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is across the whole
The,
Iraqi.
the whole Iraqis.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I don't remember the Shias, but also among Shiites it dropped down
the same.
significantly. Yes.
Really interesting. Next, I think Amatya, actually, you're next on our list. Did you have another question? Yeah.
A few issues are very brief.
Yeah.
Why is the police so popular all of a sudden? Could it be because maybe they are honest, maybe not, but because they are locally recruited, and they are known to the people around. So maybe this is one of the reasons. Another question is, I'm sorry, I'm going to something very sensitive, so you don't have to answer. But Abdul Mahdi, again, in my assessment, he's a serious guy.
New Prime Minister.
New Prime Minister. He's a serious guy. I have no doubt about that. But I perceive an inclination on his part to resign too quickly. Namely, he's an honest guy. When he's meeting strong opposition, rather than doggedly, like the British Prime Minister now, fighting it, and he simply is, you don't want me, you don't agree with me, I go home. This could be, on the one hand, a powerful weapon to force everybody to follow him, or I leave, but on the other hand, it could be a problem. About the Kurds, am I wrong in suggesting that it really doesn't matter if Barzani and Barham Saleh, for example, the new president, are going to get married to each other? It's not important, because the Kurds are coming to Baghdad with more or less similar demands for the PUK and the KDP. And if Barzani gets something from the central government, which is good for the Kurdish, for the KRG, I cannot see Barham Saleh objecting to it. And I noticed that now in his visit to Baghdad, Barzani met with everybody and his wife, but not with Barham Saleh.
Because he wasn't traveling. He was traveling, Barham Saleh.
Yes.
He timed his visit when Barham Saleh is not in Baghdad. He timed it.
There you are.
Okay.
There you are.
Wait, so we've got three interesting questions on the table. Can we very briefly?
Only one more thing, brief. Basra wants to secede from Iraq?
So,
They want to be a region, but they don't want to.
Secede a region, yes, yes.
Right.
So,
Autonomy.
So Amatsi, I think for those of you who, if they don't know who Amatsi Baram is, I think you know the answers to most of these questions. But we're going to provide our reactions. I think on the Prime Minister and his inclination, you're right. I think a lot of people know that, so they might actually test him on that inclination.
To resign.
To threaten to resign. I think his political opponents will test him on that inclination and try to make sure that they get their concessions from him. So it's a governance problem for him. Really, it's a governing problem for him, because if they use it against him too much, he might not be able to accomplish anything moving forward. So I'll just answer that one, because the rest are related to the polling, especially on the police, because that's actually interesting.
Right.
Thank you. For the police, if I showed the numbers about the army, you will see even higher trust in the army. So it's not only because we are asking about the federal police, not the local police. But this is part of the new trend. Police among Shias were always trusted, or was always trusted. But among Sunnis, it wasn't trusted. Now this is a new trend we witnessed since 2016, and the strange thing is that right now trust in police among Sunnis is higher than trust in police among Shia. This is why I say that we have a real shift in public opinion. Now, going back to this inclination of Adil Abdel Mahdi to resign, we have a proverb in Arabic say that للسلطة حسابات أخرى, which means that I know that you understand it, but for those who it means that there are another calculations for authority. So when you are in charge, it's not like when you are outside the authority. And in the first test of that inclination, Adil Abdel Mahdi didn't resign. He faced a very difficult time, very hard time in the parliament to appoint or to select his new cabinet. Yes, they didn't approve it, and they gave him a very hard time, yet he didn't resign. So, yes. Okay. So, but in policy and in politics, it's not good to threaten. It's not good to have this threaten because this might backfire on you, as you underlined it. Basra, for sure, I saw more and more people wants to have autonomy and even independency. Wow. There is a new trend right now in Basra asking for independency, not only autonomy. And they are trying to remind Basrawis about the about the historical period before or after Ottoman Emperor and before English occupy, because at that time, Al-Naqib, yes, you are sure, you are correct. Sayyid Talib al-Naqib, who wanted to be the king of Basra and Najd wal-Hujaz. So, yes, at that time, and he had this power. And this is why the English wanted to make him happy and put him as the first interior minister, but not only interior minister, with the salary of the prime minister, the same salary of the prime minister, to make him happy. He had the same power of the prime minister. So people started flaming this historical incident yes. And soon I will have a survey on that,
Okay.
on Basrawi's attitudes toward independency and autonomy.
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left, so with apologies to anyone who doesn't quite have a chance to ask a question, I want to take the question that actually came in first from our online audience. It's from a professor or a researcher, Dr. Farhad Rezai at the Belfer Center at Harvard University, and he asks a great question. Why do I say that? Because it's my question also. So, and that is this. What difference does, I'm going to paraphrase the way he wrote it, but this is the question. You said, Munkid, that Iraqis who, among the Shia, who think that Iran is a reliable partner, that percentage has declined drastically from 75% in 2015 to just, I think you said 44% or something like that now. But what difference does that really make? If Iran controls the militias, or some of them, if Iran has the ability to use force and bribery and intimidation against anyone who challenges its influence in Iraq, then what difference does it make in practice if the people have turned against Iran, even in the Shia?
Mm-hmm. I think,
great question.
Yeah. This is the question which I faced many times, especially during the last 2 days, and also in Iraq.
Here in Washington.
In Washington also, they asked this question. My simple question is that public opinion is really matter.
Okay.
It is really matter. And in Iraq, there are a lot of very powerful examples on how it matters. I've told you about the new alignment.
Yes.
And this new alignment will not ever happen unless politicians do believe that people don't want to see the same influence of Iran. Now, let us, if I want to describe it like this. We have 3 biggest Shias winner in the last election, which are Sa'irun, then Fatah, and the third was Al-Nasr. If you put Al-Nasr and Sa'irun, then majority of Shia voted against Iran. If you want to put it like this. This is maybe a very simplified way, but it gives you, again, it gives you a very good indicator. For the first time, I can see now I am on many WhatsApp groups for top politicians and intellectuals in Iraqis. I can see for the first time Iraqis politicians criticize Iran, asking to have a more balanced attitudes. Now, in social phenomenon, as you know, that things are not changing like this dramatically, and it takes time. So to be reached to the political level, this for sure will take time, but it is started.
Okay.
It is started. It will not stop. 3 or 4 years ago, 2 years ago, I was in CSIS. I have been asked this question. I said that I can see a steady trend, continuous and steady trend in Iran favorability decline among Shia. It's slow, but steady. Then someone asked me, I can recall that this will change after the election. you will see how people will go back to their sectarian way. No, it didn't change. It continued. And if it continued more in the next election, if any politician wants to be nominated or at least elected, not nominated as minister, but elected as a representative, then he should take care of this issue. I do believe that things are changing.
Very interesting. Ahmed, again, my apologies to anyone who didn't get to ask. You have the last word.
So my last word is that I disagree with Munqidh's assessment, and I wish I had more time to elaborate on that, because I do think the political class in Iraq took the decisions it took after the elections not because of its concerns about how it will be perceived when it comes to its relations with Iran. I think Iraqi politics is very transactional these days, and that's why you see those realignments. It's not because all of a sudden there's no sectarianism in Iraq. I think there's still a lot of sectarianism, and I think the way public opinion matters for me on this is on election days. If we see a higher turnout in the next elections, that's when we will know that public opinion really mattered. Otherwise, if we look at the most recent elections, public opinion, as we see, is very clear. But there was a boycott of the elections, and that's why public opinion did not matter for the governance and for the shape of the next government.
Okay. All right. Look, guys, this was really fascinating and original, different. It's very solid. I really appreciate all of your participation and your great questions. And thanks especially to our two excellent speakers today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.